Hi, everyone. Today's guest is someone who reached out to me. We do like to talk to people who have written their own books, who create art, who created their own comic books. We've had quite a few on the show. We've had lots of people who have joined our writing contests over the years, and through that have gone on to make books, and we've had them back on the show to talk about their work. And this is no exception. We have with us today someone who has created his own comic book. His own comic book tied in with things that you probably do know, and he asked for it to be on the show, and we have him on. And this is a comic book related to a character who I love, and a show which a lot of people have loved. So, without further ado, let us introduce our guest, who has made a comic book called She Devil, Woman Without Fear. And welcome to the show. Since you are very new to our audience, why don't you talk a little bit about your comic? Because you have a comic about She Devil, the Woman Without Fear, which is kind of a sequel to, of course, the most famous run of Daredevil comics ever. So right off the bat, let's introduce this comic because we're going to be talking a lot about it and about Daredevil as we go. So why don't you tell us about this comic, a little bit about it, and where people can find it, so we have that right at the very beginning.
Okay, She-Devil is a character that I created. She's the daughter of a well-known superhero called Daredevil, who I've been a fan of for many years. And I decided to create her because I figured other superheroes are given, or rather created children for them. And then I wondered, why can't someone like Daredevil have a child? You have the well-known superheroes having children, but not him. And being an avid fan, and I also noticed that there's not that many superhero females out there. So I said, let me kill two birds with one stone and create this person. Right now, you can find her on Amazon.com. I also have a website. It's called She-Devil, Daughter of the Daredevil. And really, she's the daughter of two superheroes, Daredevil and Black Widow. And it started about a year ago that I decided to make a comic book. Because for many years, what I've been doing is reading comic books, of course. Marvel is the ones I read. And I noticed some of their plots and characters could be used a certain way, different from what they have. And so what I would write, plots and stories and so forth, and I would send them into Marvel to say, listen, why don't you use this character this way, or why don't you use this story plot, or why don't you use this character in this fashion. And then about a year ago, like I said, my sister-in-law mentioned to me, well, why don't you do a comic book of your own? And that's when it hit me that, you know what, why don't I? So after I got the finance to do it, because making a comic book is very expensive.
Yeah.
And it's also time consuming.
Yeah.
So I said, finally, why don't I? So I wrote the script. The character, if you look at her, her costume is one of Daredevil's original costume.
Yeah, the Frank Miller one, yeah.
Yes, the Frank Miller one. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It was based yellow and red. And so I said that would be a perfect costume for her, for a woman. Her origin story, I kept it completely different from what others have written. And her character has a strong, she honors her father and mother extremely, extremely well. She's very close to them. Reason being because her origin is this. When she was born with heightened senses already, just like her father. So they decided to take different precautions with her. They kept her at home where she could be, for the most part, sheltered away from the outside world. Because since her senses were so heightened, it overwhelmed her, and they didn't realize at first what was going on when she was born. But in the book, it explains that she was born with her senses very heightened, and so she couldn't cope with the outside world. The hearing was too much, the smells, and so forth and so on. So her father and mother decided to keep her at home for about 10 years until she was able to understand her abilities. Her mother, being Black Widow, she
Not the most stay-at-home mom there is.
no, she wasn't the home stay-at-home mom. Um, Uh, she would be the main breadwinner, to be honest, in the book. She would go out and do missions for Shield. Matt, Daredevil, would stay home and homeschool his daughter while running a private practice of his own. Okay. Um, do you want me to tell you the whole book,
No,
or
that's a good way to start. And art wise, you definitely took influence from the Frank Miller run, or one that I have. Actually, I'm actually sitting on it. It's in a book case I'm sitting on. More recently, Daredevil Yellow. I think it also brought that art back as well.
yeah?
Um, and
I
it's
like. I'm a avid fan of Frank Miller's. I love his drawings. I love his writing. I love everything. He was the one who they said brought back Daredevil from the brink of being canceled at one point.
Yes, definitely for sure. And I just wish, like, reading modern Frank Miller, I just like, where did the guy who created these icons in the 80s and 90s go? Because he's not the same person now. I just read his Superman run and it made me want to vomit. But that's a different story. We'll talk about that at a different time. Um,
I
but
think,
but
yeah, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
but with Daredevil, you definitely have a lot of characters to work with, to work, have her talk to, and so on. Like, for example, I just recently watched. I got really far behind in those CW like Arrow shows, and I just finished for watching Arrow because it's actually done. So I'm like, okay, I have an end point to go with. And there's a lot of points where they bring in past characters to help mentor children. Like if you've seen that show, there's Nisa Al Ghul who comes in to help train a child. And with this one, you can bring in characters, like Elektra can always come back in because I guess she's technically immortal, and other characters who can come back in and also interact with them because Daredevil's like a rich landscape for a lot of these
Yes.
characters to
Uh-huh.
use.
That's one of the reasons why I created her. Um, she has a good, strong um, base to work from with Daredevil's characters. Also, if you look at the book, if you've seen the book,
Hmm.
did you see the last two pages? There are two teasers in there. You would see Elektra and another teaser in there. So she will be used, hopefully, in the near future. This first book is primarily the origin story, but I've written out a 12-issue series for her because I have other characters that I wanted to use that are sons and daughters of superheroes and supervillains. Okay,
Nice.
so I was hoping with that because I see a lot of them not being used or not being thought about at all. And I would say, why couldn't you use this character or, use this story plot or create a book from this? And, I would send ideas like that to Marvel, but I didn't hear anything. And I come to find out that I would not be hearing anything because Marvel has a policy that for the past 10 years, they cannot take anyone's ideas. I found that.
Yeah, it has to do with lawsuits, I believe, so people don't claim they
Yes,
stole their
yes.
ideas and
This
so.
has to do with a lot of lawsuits. From what I spoke to a few illustrators, and they told me that Marvel is a very cutthroat business. That they would have ideas of their own, and um, some of them are used, but the individual's not given the credit for it, and so forth. So then, after a long time, Marvel decided not to use anybody's ideas for the past 10 years.
It's probably safer that way, as far as, especially now that Disney's owns them. It's just safer
Right.
from lawsuits.
It is safer for nonsense from what I've heard. Uh, but the problem is this. I want the book to go to Marvel. I said, I spoke to the secretary, and she said that I have to not just the second book, from other people. They said if you want the book to be looked at by Marvel, you first have to publish it on your own. So that's what I'm doing with Amazon.com.
Yep.
Also, when you look for it on Amazon.com, you have to put my name, Franklin Soto, because if you put down She-Devil, you will see a great many other books with She-Devil as a title.
Yeah. Some of them are probably quite dirty. You probably...
Yes, yes. Also, the book is patented by me. It is owned by me. I have it registered with the Library Book of Congress. So the book is mine outright. The character is mine outright. Daredevil and Black Widow are Marvel owned, but they're in the book as sort of supportive characters, and they're, it's just established a connection with them, because I think this book would be great if they were to take a look at it. I think this book would last many years if they would just give the opportunity to see it.
Yeah.
But it's proven for me very difficult to get it through.
So you talk about, you have characters how you'd love to see them, have children and advance on. Have you ever considered giving Foggy Nelson a superhero child?
Actually, he does have a superhero child, and it's She-Devil herself.
But
if you looked at the book,
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna give you a little preview into the second book.
Okay. Because I know he does interact with her in the first one, but I was like, imagine if he had a son who's like Superman. It's like, yeah, Foggy, you can...
No, but to me, I thought he would be a perfect stepfather or adoptive father to She-Devil, and that's explored more or told more in the second book.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because if you've read the book, he mentioned that, someday, God forbid, that Matt, as Daredevil, will go out and not return. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And so what happened was Matt Murdock, I gave him the foresight to let Foggy know if something was to happen, please take care of my daughter. And that's what happened at the end of the book. It gets into more detail at the second book, but he does have a superhero daughter, and that's her. That's Matt's daughter that he chose him as the guardian for.
So how long did it take you? So you said you started this a year ago. How long did the actual process of writing take, and then the actual process of getting all the art? Did you do your own art, or did you hire someone to do it? How long was that process, each chunk?
The process for the artwork took close to a year. The process of writing the book took close to a month.
Okay.
Also, in that year, I wrote out the other books. Actually, the book was supposed to be 1 to 3 books long. Then, as I started to do it, I said, well, let me make it 5 books. But as I continued, more ideas popped in my head, and I said, no. I'm going to make it a 12-book series. So that's what happened. The illustrators, that was the most difficult part to do, because you got to find the right artist. So I went through several artists. And drawing the book, drawing just a simple page, I found out takes at least a day or two to create. And then you have to do revisions. And then you have to do coloring.
Yep.
And then the lettering. So all that is a very long process, a very long, difficult process to do. Because you have to make sure they do specifically what you want them to do. And so you have to be, me, the writer, have to be very specific with the artist that I'm working with on what I want. So what you see in the book is exactly what I told them to do. Like if I wanted the color to be this way, if I wanted them angled this way, if I want the word box created up top or below, that's what you got to give them. You as the writer have to make sure you give them all the necessary details for them to create the book. It's very difficult. That's one of the most difficult part of making the book, creating it itself.
I imagine that was also a learning process as you went, because when you started, did you know you had to go in that much detail and had to do step by step?
I found out, but I also welcomed it, because I kind of knew ahead of time, because I did some research and so forth, and I knew that that's what you have to be. You have to be very, very specific with when you want something done. You have to give the illustrator exactly the detail that you need to be done for the book.
Okay. Now that makes a lot of sense, and you can definitely tell that there's a single vision in here. It's not balancing it out. One of the things that actually drives me crazy is when I read like a comic book run or a comic book, and you can tell they changed the artist halfway through, but they didn't bother to redo any of the older art. And so like you have some runs of like say 5 comics, and there's like 3 different artists throughout the 5, and you're like, why did you keep on changing? Please stop. Um, and yeah,
Well, actually, the main artist he did the entire drawing and sketching, but then something happened that he couldn't continue. So he then sent me to someone else who could finish, and then that person did well. But some artists, by the way, they do illustrations, but they don't do coloring.
yeah.
So I had somebody else do the coloring, and then I had someone else do the lettering. The lettering is what the writing that you see inside the book. So it was a total of like 3 different people working on the book with me.
Wow. And then you have to pay, and then for artists, you pay them per picture or per day. With lettering, I'm
Right.
assuming it's per page.
Right. Well, actually, what you do, you enter into a contract with each person. So you pay the illustrator. You're going to draw 32 pages for me, and I'm going to pay you this amount of money, which was a lot for me, a lot of money for me.
Yeah.
And then with the colorist, the most expensive part was the illustration, was the drawing. Then the coloring wasn't that expensive, and the lettering wasn't that expensive because what they're doing for me is just adding the paint for coloring, and the lettering is like adding the decals to the book.
And they don't
So
take
they
as
were
long.
expensive, but the whole thing was very expensive to do. Yes.
Yeah, we have a friend who made a comic. We were trying to Kickstart it for him. I think it's Human Comics, and just the cost of just the artist alone. Because if you want art a specific way, and you have an artist you like, you have to be able to pay that artist to get what
Yeah.
you need, or else things can get really delayed. And making your own comic book, unless you are the type of person who's skilled at doing everything, it'll be
Hmm.
thousands of dollars, and that's minimum. And
I was very, very fortunate. The site I went to, let me give them some free advertisement, was Fiverr.com. That's where I met them. And you really have to do your searching, do your due diligence. You got to really search for that artist that you want. I must have went through like at least 100 before I found out which ones that I want. You want a specific artist for your specific needs.
Mhm.
And it was really, really, that was the most hardest part, the artist, finding him and then working with them and so forth. And expensive wise, the only reason I did have a chance to do this book was because I saved up the money to do it. I got some money, the finance, and once I got that done, I said, I'm going to do the book.
So why don't you tell people the name of your artists so that they can, go to
Uh,
Fiverr themselves and use them if they want to.
um, they could. I'll probably put that in the second book then because
Okay.
this one is already done. So I'll probably put them in the second book because artists from the ones I use are not even in the United States. Some are from oh my goodness, Ecuador, Bangladesh. The colorist was in South Africa, excuse me, Africa,
Okay.
and so one was in Asia and
Nice.
China. So you get, you know, artists from all over the land, all over the world to work with, which is great because you could save a lot of money. Because, you know, say if I want to pay an artist here $100, I could hire a team in China for $100, you know, because the money there is our money there, our currency is worth more over there. So I can get more done, more people hired to do a job.
That makes
So
sense.
just yeah, you know, so that's one of the reasons I was able to do the book as well.
So you said you saved up money to do the book. Is that money also being used for book two, or are you waiting for more money to do book two?
No, I have saved up enough to do book two. Yes.
Okay, so book two is being worked on right now, artist wise.
Right now, I'm doing another book, a redo of Frank Miller's old book, which is Daredevils, where It involves Bullseye versus Elektra.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if okay,
Yeah,
that
very
was a
famous.
big.
That's very famous. That's a very, very famous story. Yeah.
Well, I'm doing a reverse book, in other words. Um, I have a cover. Halfway through creating it, okay? It's where suppose Daredevil killed, excuse me, Elektra killed Bullseye, you know?
Oh,
So I'm having that done.
so kind of like a Marvel What If.
A Marvel What If, exactly, yes. I could probably send you the cover later if I can.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I like that idea because that's a very famous one, and if uh, well, anyone who watched the Ben Affleck movie knows that story as well. That's the one they
Yeah.
clearly pulled from, and I
Mhm.
do say, people, if you have never seen the director's cut of that movie, give it a second chance. It's not as bad as you think. Um,
No, no, it wasn't bad. It was not as bad as they think it was. I think it could have been done better, of course.
yeah, it could have been
Um,
better, but the director's cut at least made it more focused on Murdoch and the lawyer part and who he is. And I just find
mhm.
it weird. It's the first time I've ever seen a director's cut where they actually cut the sex scene. It's like usually you're like, we're gonna add like seven more,
Right.
but
I think because a lot of young guys, young children, want to see it as well.
yeah.
The adults, us adults who love Daredevil took our kids, and we don't want to see too much.
And Michael Clark Duncan
Yeah,
though was really awesome
we will.
as
We
Kingpin.
will.
And then of course the only problem with Michael Clark Duncan as Kingpin is the show had Vincent D'Onofrio, who that's like the role he was made for, and I don't think Marvel could ever top his Kingpin, no matter what they do. I think Vincent D'Onofrio better be Kingpin if they ever bring him into the MCU.
Right. From what I heard, they want to bring Daredevil into the MCU. I think in the Spider-Man series,
Yes,
right?
that's what I heard too. The problem is, are they going to bring what they've already done with Netflix, or are they going to bring new? Because how are you going to top Vincent? How?
From what I gather, I think they might have all new characters. Yeah, I
Oh,
think so. A new Daredevil, a new Elektra, a new Kingpin. So
that's the scary part because Kingpin was so perfect. It's just really hard to like. I can see redoing other ones, but Kingpin was,
spot on. He's
yeah.
really good. He's really good.
Maybe bring him, and if I were to say bring anyone, just bring Charlie Cox and bring Kingpin, and everyone else can be new, and you'll be okay. Even though I really
Right.
did like Elektra, I thought that storyline actually worked really, really, really well.
Me too. Yes.
Um, but it's a hard thing to do because if you do one, you're stuck with continuity. If you do the other, you're not. And then comic wise, I haven't read new Daredevil comics recently. I think most. When's the last time I read? Because I read lots of Spider Man, tons of Spider Man,
Yeah.
and
I like.
Daredevil does interact quite a bit with Black Cat and so on. But I think the last main run, I did read some of the Ultimates. I did read Ultimates because my wife loves Daredevil, and so I bought her the Ultimate run. Um, and I own Yellow.
Did your wife see my comic book?
I have not shown her your one yet because she's she's had a project in her head where she's writing a story, and she wanted to get it out, and so I'm like, I'm not going to interrupt your writing. Just get what you need out of your head, out of your head. And she hasn't gotten it fully out yet.
Okay. Yeah, because I would like a woman's opinion on the comic book because women love women superheroes as well.
Yeah, I
You know.
will. I will send it. I will send it to her as soon as she gets her idea out of her head and on the on the page when she's what she's writing right now. But I definitely say one thing that most seems like one of the most challenging things when it comes to comic books, which I've noticed, especially private ones, like independent ones, is the lettering, as you say, because fonts. Comic books use specific fonts, and fonts can be. Yeah, you have to get the right size, you have to get the right font, you have to get the right how bold it is, how light it is, and that
Yeah.
for someone like me seems like it would be extremely challenging because I'd want to keep tampering with it. Nope, new font, do something crazy. um,
Well, yeah. Depends again on the person who does it. That person has to be proficient in what type of font you want. If you want different fonts in the book as well, you have to use specific ones. You have to be using like one specific font for the words. Because if you ever notice, there's different fonts in a book.
yeah,
It's one specific one. So
especially on the
you're
covers.
especially on the covers, yes. Because if you look at my cover, there's like two different ones. You know, I'm not sure if you could tell, but I had to use two different fonts for it.
I
For the
will
cover,
dive back into
font.
the color and have a look at that. Let me see. I have it right here. Oh,
Okay.
I see it. Okay, so the Woman Without Fear is one font, and then She Devil's a very different font,
Yes.
and the Daughter of Daredevil might be a different font as well.
Yeah, yes, it is.
So three fonts.
Yes.
Just pulled it up right there. So you have issue one out. People can buy it on Amazon. Got to put your name in there though, else you might pull up something very different. Issue two is going to happen. Right now
Uh-huh.
you're doing a kind of a Marvel What If. So um, this is your very first comic book you ever did, right?
Yes, yes, it is.
So had you ever even like sketched out comic books before or thought about like the full process of a comic book before, or is this like I'm just going to dive in and see what happens?
Well, I wrote stories out.
Yeah, you said
Um,
stories, but comic books way
I
more than
wrote,
just a story.
right. What I did was, like I said before, I used to write scripts and plots and so on and so forth. With this, I said, I'm going to do an entire story. I'm going to do my own story. Because aside from doing comic books, I also do manuscripts of my own
Mhm.
that I write. So with this, it wasn't too difficult to do, to be honest. I was able to, like I said, it was supposed to do 1 to 3 part. Then it just got more and more and more, and then now I wrote a 12 part. Um, Also, if you look in the back of the book, you see teasers.
Yes.
Okay, that's aside from the 12 books that I've already written.
Yeah, because I see. Well, In the Reach of the Hand is one of them.
Right, and did
Man
you see the other
Crush.
one?
Man Crush.
Yes. Those are just two teasers. Um, they're not part of the 12 book story that I wrote.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Um,
Actually, I'm putting teasers in all the books, to be honest.
so I have two more questions for you. One is, as a Daredevil fan, and now a writer of Daredevil lore, at least Daredevil headcanon, um, what books of Daredevil would you recommend? If people want to read Daredevil, what books would you recommend beyond Frank Miller? Since we've already said Frank Miller's run is the most important one.
Well, that took away a big part, a big decision right there, one of my decisions. Right now, I think Zach, um, I forgot his last name, Shadinsky.
That sounds right.
He's doing he's doing a very good um, story run with Daredevil now. I think what he did, he brought it more back to the basics, like Frank Miller had, and to me, he's just doing an amazing job. I also spoke to him on Facebook, by the way. You
Nice.
know, I wanted to send him the book and so forth, and he gave me some ideas of what I should do. I think the other would be, say, you know,
What about
well,
Guardian
Frank.
Devil? The Kevin Smith one.
Guardian Devil was a good one. Guardian Devil was a good one. Um, but to me, overall, if you allow me, I would say do the Frank Miller because the Frank Miller reinvented the Daredevil series, and he gave it a new breath of life when he started it all over again.
Okay.
That would be such a good people for youngsters to read about as well. You know, because it was that idea that gave me on what to do with She Devil. Like you don't want your my superhero characters fighting aliens or fighting something out of the ordinary. You want them to be more relatable, and that's what I did with her. I made it more relatable by keeping her um, at low levels, say, dealing with gangsters, the superheroes here, and so on and so forth.
And that's the strength of
Uh,
Daredevil in general. He's in Hell's Kitchen, not all of New
yeah,
York. Spider-Man has all of New York. Daredevil's in Hell's Kitchen. You don't have Daredevil fighting the Chitauri. At least not
no,
usually. If he's there for a very specific. You do this specific part thing, not you're out there fighting Chitauri.
yeah, he's not out there fighting the scroll or the Kree or whoever,
Yeah,
And I think that's what makes him more relatable. And I think that's also what made my character more relatable because a lot of people found it very interesting. And I was pretty surprised at the amount of positiveness that I got back.
yeah.
So far, I've got nothing but positive from everybody.
That's
And
it's
then
it's well deserving. It's a well written story. Um, the only challenge is if there's only one issue and you're the type of one like me who's like, I'm gonna go through the next 57 issues of Batman right now. There's one. So now we have to wait for issue two.
Yeah, because remember, finance wise, this is coming out of my pocket.
Yeah.
Everything's coming out of my pocket. So, you know, and so forth. And then artistry, you can't rush artistry. You really got to be specific again. Because even with this book, even as specific as I was, when you see it drawn and colored, you might say, well, can I revise that again? Can we do this over again? Because I think it would be better this way than that way, and so forth. But the character for me, when I did her, I didn't just want to write a female superhero character. I want to, like I said, put something that somebody can relate to, everybody can relate to. I also want to put in my stories a lesson that people can learn, you know, and I want the book to have some depth to it, some emotional depth to it, like how she felt about her parents, like how she coped, and how being a single child, how difficult it was for her, and what kind of lessons did she learn from her parents, and what model does she live by now that they're gone. And I think you read that at the last page.
Yep.
That I want to give to everybody to show this is one of the reasons why she continued. And that's what I like to do in mostly all my books, give some type of lesson or story.
And it fits in the story versus what we did in the 80s where they're like, you have an episode of G.I. Joe and they're like, remember kids, don't do drugs. It had nothing to do with this episode, but don't do drugs. But they had to put in a lesson at the end of something, or like He-Man. Now remember kids, don't hurt cats. I'm like, what does this have to do with what you just showed? But okay, so last but not least, if people want to get hold of you or want to follow your work and find out when future comics are coming out, where do you want them to go? What's your official website, and how do you want to follow you on social media? Where would you like them to go?
I think they could go to Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, and they could follow me there if they like. I'll try to put up my, recent ideas on the next book. It's just that right now I'm doing several things at one time. Right now, trying to finish this What If, then do the second book, and also finish a TV manuscript that I'm working on that I want to send in to studios, and hopefully they will enjoy.
Wow.
It's not a comic book; it's a manuscript. It's those 2 to 3 page manuscripts that I have done, and that's what I'm working on as well. So I'm working on a multitude of things.
Doing everything at one time.
Yes. So I'm glad I'm still awake to talk to you.
And you just got off working, so.
And after this, I have to go back. Yes.
I don't miss night shifts. I don't at all.
Yeah, I can understand. Yeah, it's just that my job. I'm an essential. I do security, and so I'm needed. I've been working since the start of this virus came out. So.
I used to work in a hospital where we do night shifts, and I always preferred. I'd much rather do the 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 11 o'clock at night one, anytime, than what's the other shift? 10:30 to 7. That's just. It's just not good, especially if you have kids. Because when are you sleeping?
Yeah, definitely. I'm surprised you're awake with 3 children. Oh my goodness! I don't know how you do it, but I'm glad you do. And also, people don't know when you write, it takes hours. For me, I write from morning till night at times. Because being a writer, you have to be really. How could I say? You have to be engrossed in that work. You really got to focus on it. So writing is a very long thing to do, but it's also very enjoyable. For me, I found out to be enjoyable. Even though I spent a lot of hours, I enjoyed those hours. I found that out myself, and I spoke to other writers and so forth, and they said when they started out, you have to write a lot of hours in a day. And I said, yeah, I found that out, but I enjoy it. I find, it's okay. Because a lot of people don't know when you write, you're there at the desk, 5, 6 hours, 8 hours a day.
And then you have to be willing sometimes to just check it out. Like if it doesn't work, maybe go away.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I found that out. You gotta be willing to, If this doesn't work, okay, then you gotta let things go or try another avenue. You understand?
Yeah.
So I found all of those out by myself because when I wrote to I spoke to other people, they said, yeah, that's what you have to do. For when you write a character, you have to go yourself into that character, bring yourself into that character. Even though I'm not a female superhero, I try to focus on what would a woman do, what would a superhero do, so on and so forth. So, I ask friends, family members, what would you do if you were her, you know, so on and so forth. And, you got to do your research, your background research into a lot of things when you write a book, you know. So you can't write about a hospital if you never worked in one.
Yep.
You can't write about a car accident if you've never been in one, or you don't know somebody who has, and how do they cope, and so forth. And so that's how I do. I try to, get as much information I can, then use that information for the ideas for the book.
And it turned out pretty well so far. And I look forward to seeing the future and reading the future because I want to know where this is going to go. Because so far, so good.